Texas Congressman Ron Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates for President of the United States. Congressman Paul, we begin with you, sir.
I'm Congressman Ron Paul, Congressman from Texas. I am the defender of the Constitution. I'm the champion of liberty. This shows the roadmap to peace and prosperity.
I'm Rick Santorum.
Congressman Paul, you've questioned the fiscal conservative credentials of all these gentlemen, but particularly this week, Senator Santorum. You have a new television ad that labels him a fake. Why?
Because he's a fake.
I'm real, Ron. I'm real.
Congratulations.
I'm real. Thank you.
No, I find it really fascinating that when people are running for office, they're really fiscally conservative. When they're in office, they do something different. And then when they explain themselves, they say, oh, I want to repeal that. So the senator voted for No Child Left Behind, but now he voted for it, but now he's running on the effort to get rid of it. So I think the record is so bad, you know, with the politicians. And, nobody accuses me of not having voted for too much. They're always accusing me for not voting for enough. And I've been running in office off and on for a good many years. And over all those years, I've never voted for a budget deficit. I never voted to increase the national debt. Matter of fact, there's only one appropriation bill that I voted for, and that was for veterans. I assumed from the 1970s on that we were embarking on a very dangerous path, and we're involved in that danger right now. So this idea of being fiscally conservative now that we're running for office and we're going to repeal something that we did before, I mean, it loses credibility is what our problem is. So, and the one thing that I think should annoy all Americans is the voting for foreign aid. I mean, just think, their foreign aid packages are huge, and when the member votes for it, they don't say, well, this money's going to ABC because I love that country, but it's the principle of the way the government works. You vote for foreign aid because for some weird reason it's supposed to be good for America, but then it goes and helps all our enemies. That's what I disapprove of.
Senator Santorum, respond quickly.
Ron, the Weekly Standard just did a review looking at the national taxpayer unions, I think Citizens Against Government Waste, and they measured me up against the other 50 senators who were serving when I did, and they said that I was the most fiscally conservative senator in the Congress in the 12 years that I was there. My ratings with the national taxpayer unions were A's or B's. They were very high from the Citizens Against Government Waste. I got a Hero Award. I was a leader, as you know, on taking on tough issues, which is the entitlement programs, not just welfare reform, but I also worked on Medicare reform and Medicaid reform, and also was a leader on trying to deal with Social Security. And I did that not representing one of the most conservative districts in the state of Texas, but in the state of Pennsylvania, with the second largest per capita population of seniors in the country. And I can tell you, those seniors really cared about Social Security. Why? Because all my rich seniors moved to Florida and Arizona. And what's left in Pennsylvania is folks who relied on Social Security. And I was out there as a Republican senator, a conservative voting record, over a 90% conservative voting record from the American Conservative Union. By the way, Ron, you ranked 145th in the bottom half of Republicans this year in a conservative voting record from that same organization. We had a strong record in a tough state to be a conservative. If I can stand up in the state of Pennsylvania, which hasn't elected a Republican president since 1988, and have a strong principled voting record on issues that were tough in my state, senior issues. Imagine now, as a president of the United States, with a Tea Party movement and a riled-up conservative base, what we can accomplish in Washington, D.C.
Congressman, quickly.
You know, that's always a cop-out when you compare yourself to the other members of Congress. The American people are sick and tired of the members of Congress. They get about 9% rating. But this whole thing about comparison of conservative votes, I think you make a very important point. I don't rate one at the top. If it's spending or on taxes, I'm at the very top because I vote for the least amount of spending and the least amount of taxes, which means that some of the conservative ratings, you have to realize, sometimes conservatives want to spend money too. When it comes to overseas spending, you vote for the foreign aid. Conservatives are quite pleased with spending money overseas, but if you're a strict fiscal conservative and a constitutionalist, you don't vote for that kind of stuff, and so you can't just go by the ratings.
As you can see, it's an important issue to the people in the audience. I think it's one of
Can't veto the earmark.
Well, we tried to do that, by the way. I supported the line item veto.
That's what I support.
Hold on. Nick, I agree with you. I support the line item veto. I voted for a line item veto so we could do just that. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court struck it down. I would like to go back as president again and give the president the authority to line item veto. But that's not the issue. The issue is, were they transparent? And the bottom line was, when I was in the United States Senate, there was transparency, and Congressman Paul, who is one of the most prolific earmarkers in the Congress today, would tell you, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that that's a fact.
Right.
That he.
I think you got a chance to say a word.
Mr. Speaker, you were referenced by the governor. You first, then Congressman Paul. Don't worry, we'll get to you, Congressman, I promise. Good. Congressman Paul, answer Senator Santorum, please, sir.
I followed that, and
You know, there's reason for the confusion because because it's all Congress's fault. They're all messed up. They don't know what they're doing in Congress is the real reason. But this whole idea of earmarking is designating how the money is spent. What a lot of people don't understand is if the Congress doesn't say the way the money should be spent, it goes to the executive branch. And that's the bad part. If you were actually cutting, it would make a difference. But you don't want to give more power to the executive branch. Even if I'm president, I don't want more power over that funding. That should be with the people and with the Congress. But earmarking, the reason we get into trouble is the irresponsibility of Congress. Take your highway funds. We're supposed to pay a user fee. We pay our gasoline tax. We should get our fair share back. But what do? They take the highway funds and other these trust funds, and they spend this money overseas in these wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And then when the highways need building, then you have to go and fight the political system and know who to deal with and maneuver and try to get some of your money back. But if you say you're against the earmarking and fuss and fume over, the answer is vote against the bill. That is what I do. I argue for the case of the responsibility being on the Congress, but it's the responsibility of us who believe in fiscal conservatism to vote against the bill. We need to vote against the spending is what we need to do.
All right. Let's take a... Congressman Paul, as you join the conversation, criticism of President Obama here, but I also want you to address the state's current Republican governor, Rick Snyder, who supports Governor Romney, but that's irrelevant to this point. He says, quote, the bailout actually was something that really worked. Is that Republican governor wrong?
Well, you know that's interesting that when they argue that case. First, I don't like the idea that you have good bailouts and bad bailouts. If bailouts are bad, they're bad, and we shouldn't be doing it. But this argument about maybe one that works, you know, well, now that the bankruptcy or the bailing out of GM worked, I said that's sort of like if a criminal goes out and robs a bank and he's successful, therefore you endorse what he did because he's successful. But you have to rob people. You have to distort the law. The government is supposed to protect contracts. They're not supposed to regulate contracts, and they're not supposed to undermine contracts. And that's what we've been doing. In the housing bubble, we undermine contracts. And this is what we're doing here. So you want to respect the contracts. A lot of people will accuse me of advocating a free market, that there's no regulations. Actually, the regulations are tougher because you have to go through bankruptcy and you have to face up to this. And it isn't like General Motors would be destroyed. Newt made that point there, that there were good parts of General Motors, but politicians can't figure this out. Then they serve the special interest, and then you have labor fighting big business. I opt for the free market and the defense of liberty. That's what we need in this country. All
right. We're off to a good start, gentlemen. We're going to take our first break. Contenders for the Republican nomination. We take a question now from CNNPolitics.com. You can see it up on the screen here. Since birth control is the latest hot topic, which candidate believes in birth control, and if not, why? As you can see, It's a
very popular question you have.
It's a very popular question in the audience, as we can see. Look, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it is. Please.
Can I just make a point?
Sure.
These guys are giving you some feedback here, John.
I see that.
I think they're making it very clear.
No, I think, look.
Congressman Paul.
As an OB doctor, I've dealt with birth control pills and contraception for a long time. This is a consequence of the fact the government has control of medical care and medical insurance, and then we fight over how we dictate how this should be distributed. Sort of like in schools, once the government takes over the schools, especially at the federal level, then there's no right position. Then you have to argue which prayer, are you allowed to pray, and you get into all the details. The problem is the government is getting involved in things they shouldn't be involved, especially at the federal level. But sort of along the line of the pills creating the immorality, I don't see it that way. I think the immorality creates the problem of wanting to use the pills, so you don't blame the pills. I think it's sort of like the argument, conservatives use the argument all the time about guns. Guns don't kill, criminals kill. So in a way, it's the morality of society that we have to deal with. The pill is there and, you know, it contributes maybe, but the pills can't be blamed for the immorality of our society.
Yeah.
Governor, please.
Yeah.
But I want to go a step further, because this makes a point that Ron Paul's been making for a generation and that people need to take very seriously. When you have government as the central provider of services, you inevitably move towards tyranny, because the government has the power of force. You inevitably, and I think this is true whether it's Romney Care or Obamacare or any other government centralized system, you inevitably move towards the coercion of the state, and the state saying, if you don't do what we, the politicians, have defined, you will be punished, either financially or you'll be punished in some other way, like going to jail. And that's why we are, I think, at an enormous crossroads in this country. And I think the fact is, for almost all of us who've been at this for any length of time, we're now looking at an abyss that forces you to change what you may once have thought. And I suspect all four of us are much more worried today about the power of the state than we would have been, with the possible exception of Congressman Paul, than we would have been at any point in the last 25 years.
John,
Congressman, please.
Follow-up. You know, we talk about the morning after pill. Actually, the morning after pill is nothing more than a birth control pill. So if birth control pills on the market, the morning after pill. So if you're going to legalize birth control pills, you can't separate the two. They're all basically the same hormonally. But once again, the question is, if you voted for Planned Parenthood, like the senator has, you voted for birth control pills. And you literally, because funds are fungible, you literally vote for abortion, because Planned Parenthood gets the money. Oh, I'll buy birth control pills, but then they have the money left over to do the abortion. So that's why you have to have a pretty strong resistance to voting for these bunches of bills put together. Planned Parenthood should get nothing, let alone designate how they spend.
Senator Santorum.
As Congressman Paul knows, I oppose Title X funding. I've always opposed Title X funding, but it's included in a large appropriation bill that includes a whole host of other things, including the funding for the National Institutes of Health, the funding for Health and Human Services, and a whole bunch of other departments. It's a multi-billion-dollar bill. What I did, because Title X was always pushed through, I did something that no one else did. Congressman Paul did. I said, well, if you're going to have Title X funding, then we're going to create something called Title 20. Which is going to provide funding for abstinence-based programs. So at least we'll have an opportunity to provide programs that actually work in keeping children from being sexually active instead of facilitating children from being sexually active. And I pushed Title 20 to accomplish that goal. So while, yes, I admit, I voted for large appropriation bills, and there were things in there I didn't like, things in there I did, but when it came to this issue, I proactively stepped forward and said that we need to do something at least to counterbalance it, A. B, I would say that I've always been very public, that as President of the United States, I will defund Planned Parenthood. I will not sign any appropriation bill that funds Planned Parenthood.
Senator, go ahead.
John, this demonstrates the problem that I'm talking about. There's always an excuse to do this. Now, Title 20, I don't know whether you inferred that I would support Title 20 for abstinence. No, it would cost money as a program. It's not a program of the federal government to get involved in our lives this way. If you want laws like that, maybe to say, but the federal government shouldn't even be spending money on abstinence. That's way too much more. I don't see that in the Constitution anyway.
Just a brief comment.
I'm going to take a question from a voter down here in our audience tonight. Sir, identify yourself and ask your question, please.
Gentlemen, my name is Gary Lott, and I'm from Kingman, Arizona. It seems that Arizona has come under federal attacks just for wanting to secure its southern border. What will you and your administrations do to fix the situation, to secure our border, and to protect the American people?
Congressman Paul, I want to go to you first on this one. You're from a border state. And as you answer Gary's question, a recent federal analysis says the cost of secure fencing, which they have in a good deal of the border along this state, would cost about $3 million per mile. Is that a good investment, money well spent?
Probably not, but we can do a better job. And the best way to do it is forget about the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan and deal with our border and put the resources on this border. This is what we need. But we need to change the rules. We reward illegal immigration. They get benefits. Texas hospitals and schools are going bankrupt. The restraints on the states and Obama's restraints on the states to do with it. Why isn't, if an illegal comes across the border and they go on private property, why isn't that trespassing? And why don't you have the right to stop it? So, but there should be no mandates from the federal government about what you must do. Under the 9th and 10th, there would be essentially none. But the federal government does have responsibility for these borders, and I just hate to see all these resources. I think that we should have much more of immigration service on the border to make it easier. It's hard to even get to visit this country. We're losing a lot of visitors and workers that could come to this country because we have an inefficient immigration service. And then that invites the illegal. We have to deal, we can't endorse the illegal, but the program today endorses the illegal problems. And a weak economy is always detrimental too because of the welfare state. We have welfare at home and some jobs go begging. We have jobs going begging in this country in the midst of the recession. Has to do with the economy. You can't ignore the economy, but also the welfare state, allowing immigrants to come over and then get the benefits. If you subsidize something, you get more of. So there's a lot we could do and we should do, and certainly this president is not doing a very good job.
Mr. Speaker, the fence has been appointed. We're just moments away from getting the answer to this question from a viewer. Please define yourself using one word and one word only. A lot of excitement here in Mesa, Arizona, and a lot more of our Republican presidential debate just ahead. Please stay with us. We're back in Mesa, Arizona for our Arizona Republican presidential debate. And gentlemen, we have a question here from CNNPolitics.com. Without caveats or explanations, please define yourself using one word and one word only. Congressman Paul?
Consistent.
Senator Santorum?
The problem is the character of our wars. And I don't like to think of people in groups. Individuals have rights, not groups. So you don't have women's rights or men's rights. And we still have draft registration. What I fear is the draft coming back because we're getting way overly involved. And the draft, we keep registering our 18-year-olds. So when the draft comes, we're going to be registering young women, and because of this, they're going to be equal. Now, the wars we fight aren't defensive war, they're offensive war. We're involved in way too much. They're undeclared, they're not declared by the Congress. And so we're in wars that shouldn't be involved. So I don't want even the men to be over there. I don't want women being killed, but I don't want the men being killed in these wars. But because now we have accepted now for 10 years that we're allowed to start war, we call it preemptive war, preventive war. Well, that's an aggressive war. I believe in the Christian just war theory that you have to morally justify the war in defense. Now, if we're defending our country and we need to defend, believe me, men and women will be in combat and defending our country, and that's the way it should be. But when it's an offensive war going where we shouldn't be, that's quite a bit different. So it's the foreign policy that needs examined.
Senator? Congressman Paul, all three of your rivals here make a passionate case. All three of them make a passionate case that this is a vital U.S. national security interest. But you disagree.
I disagree because we don't know if they have a weapon. Matter of fact, there's no evidence that they have it. There is no evidence. Israel claims they do not have it, and our government doesn't. I don't want them to get a weapon, but I think what we're doing is encouraging them to have a weapon because they feel threatened. If you look at a map of Iran, we have 45 bases around their country plus our submarines. The Iranians can't possibly attack anybody, and we're worrying about the possibility of one nuclear weapon. Now, just think about the Cold War. The Soviets had 30,000 of them, and we talked to them. The Soviets killed 100 million people, and the Chinese, and we worked our way out of it. And if you want to worry about nuclear weapons, worry about the nuclear weapons that were left over from the Soviet Union. They're still floating around. They don't have them all detailed. So we're ready to go to war. I say going to war rapidly like this is risky and it's reckless. Now, if they're so determined to go to war, the only thing I plead with you for, if this is the case, is do it properly. Ask the people and ask the Congress for a declaration of war. This is war, and people are going to die, and you got to get a declaration of war. Just to go and start fighting. But the sanctions are already backfiring, and all that we do is literally doing the opposite. When we're attacked, we all came together. When we attack when we put them under attack, they get together, and it neutralizes that. They rally around their leaders. So what we're doing is literally enhancing the power. Think of the sanctions that we dealt with Castro. 50 years, and Castro is still there. It doesn't work. So I would say a different approach. We need to, at least, we talked to the Soviets during the Cuban crisis. We at least can talk to somebody who we do not have proof that he has a weapon. Why go to war so carelessly?
Let's stay on this theme. We have a question from CNNPolitics.com, a question, you can see it up on the screen here, in regards to Syria. Should the United States intervene, and should we arm the rebellion? Senator Santorum, let me start.
To get Iran to pull back, and we can, at that point, with crippling sanctions and a very clear statement that military action is an action that will be taken if they pursue nuclear weaponry, that can change the course of world history.
Let's try to get another question from Congressman quickly, please.
No, I get a minute. Real quickly. You know, I've tried the moral argument, I've tried the constitutional argument on these issues, and they don't go so well. But there's an economic argument as well. Matter of fact, Al-Qaeda's had a plan to bog us down in the Middle East and bankrupt this country. That's exactly what they're doing. We've spent $4 trillion of debt in the last 10 years being bogged down in the Middle East. The neoconservatives who now want us to be in Syria, want us to go to Iran and have another war. And we don't have the money. We're already, today, gasoline hit $6 a gallon in Florida, and we don't have the money. So I don't believe I'm going to get the conversion on the moral and the constitutional arguments in the near future, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to win this argument for economic reasons. Just remember when the Soviets left. They left not because we had to fight them, they left because they bankrupted this country, and we better wake up, because that is what we're doing here. We're destroying our currency, and we have a financial crisis on our hands.
Let's take another question from our audience. Congressman Paul.
News going in the right direction, but not far enough. The Constitution is very, very clear. There's no authority for the federal government to be involved in education. There's no prohibition in the Constitution for the states to be involved in education. That's not a bad position, and we can sort things out. But once again, the senators was for No Child Left Behind, but now he's running for president. Now he's running to repeal No Child Left Behind once again. But and he calls this a team sport. He has to go along to get along, and that's the way the team plays. But that's what the problem is with Washington. That's what's been going on for so long. So I don't accept that form of government. I understand it. That is the way it works. You were with the majority, you were the whip, and you organized and got these votes all passed. But I think the obligation of all of us should be the oath of office. We should take, and it shouldn't be the oath to the party. I'm sorry about that. But it isn't the oath to the party. It's the oath to our office to obey the law, and the law is the Constitution.
Gentlemen, thank you. One more break. When we come back, the final question. Republican voters are clearly having a hard time. I want to close with this question. Help the voters who still have questions about you. What is the biggest misconception about you in the public debate right now? Congressman Paul, we'll start with you, sir.
I would say the perpetuation of the myth by the media that I can't win. And the totally ignoring some statistics that showed it to be the opposite. Just recently, there was a poll in Iowa, and it matched all the four of us up against Obama. And guess what? I did the very best. So I would say that is the biggest myth. But let me tell you, though, in public perception is one thing, but when you go around and talk to the American people and we have our rallies, that misconception isn't there. And I think that's the biggest misconception that I have to deal with.
Mr. Speaker?